Why the theory of brain computation is called perceptron theory. It is not exactly what we think about your learning, thinking, memory, and behavior. It's a simple, highly predictive model of that. I have spent most of life as a computational cognitive neuroscientist trying to explain to your brain how your brain works in simple computational terms that have great predictive power. Early on, I encountered the idea of the perceptron as the fundamental unit of brain computation. When replicated in the countable billions or trillions computing in parallel, perceptrons can accurately model your thoughts, your goals, and your actions. Ultimately, I decided that the perceptron, as a theoretical unit, was a good idea. In this brief paper, I want to establish why. What is a perceptron? Technically, what is a perceptron? You can use one of your hands to show numerical inputs coming into your fingers, with each finger having a memory which is a number 2. For each finger, the two numbers are multiplied together. The results are added together to give a sum of the weighted inputs. This sum is then optionally thresholded or otherwise normalized to give a resultant number. The inputs can come from your senses like your fingertips, or the thumb outputs of other perceptrons. There are many ways these perceptions can be wired together, but this is the essence. Wikipedia defines exactly this numerical computation as a perceptron, which you can read as a mathematical formula. It also provides a history of this computational idea. One perceptron is not a computer, but we have known for dozens of years that if you compose enough of them together in the right ways, they can perform the operations that regular computers perform as well as perceive natural language, create computer graphics, reason in logic, program computers, do any other mathematics, and even interpret sensations, and have conversations in human natural language with real humans about them. Perceptron, Wikipedia. In machine learning, the perceptron is an algorithm for supervised learning of binary classifiers. A binary classifier. N, wikipedia.org. It is a big deal to distinguish between what one perceptron can do, which is not much, from what billions can do in a living neural system. For example, in the Wikipedia entry, it correctly states that one perceptron is a linear, often binary classifier. Wiring these up in the right ways, the perceptions, thoughts, and actions that can emerge are in no way linear or binary. How many perceptrons in your brain? A lot, but we can only estimate. We can imagine how neurons are wired together, and then might think of a synapse as an input or output of a perceptron. Neuroscience estimates the number of synapses to a neuron to be about 3,000 on average, with the outputs being one synapse for each perceptron. Or, another way, there are 3,000 to 3,000 possible perceptrons in each average neuron because perceptron outputs feed other perceptron inputs. With a typical human brain estimated by the neuroscience to be 100 billion neurons, that gives 9 million to 3,100 billion, or a little less than 900 quadrillion, or 900 quadrillion perceptrons between your ears. If we make other assumptions, we can get counts both smaller than this number and larger than this number. It's not worth trying to count them because, frankly, the brain and neurons are very complicated devices. In fact, we do not know all the details to map simple perceptron computations to observable neuron computations. But the numbers of these perceptron units computing in parallel in your brain and nervous system are clearly unimaginably huge. Nature does this big number thing all the time. For example, the cheap red laser pointer at 1/2 watt is spitting out 16 quadrillion photons a second when you press the little button. This number is given by Einstein's equation for counting photons by wavelength, red, and energy, watts. Since photons carry all electrical energy in your brain, and your brain runs at about 25 watts by the neuroscience when you are awake, you get a brain potential number processing rate of 25 times 2, worth 16 quadrillion, or 800 quadrillion electric binary computations a second. But the electric computations are not actually binary. If we assume each perceptron output-input is as little as 8-bit bytes, that number is closer to a brain computational potential of 6,400 quadrillion perception computations per second. The human brain, in fact any living neural system by any animal, is enormously complex. How are all the perceptrons connected? What are they computing that we can observe and talk about? Perceptrons as propositions you can observe in your natural language. A unit of knowledge in this system is not the bit or byte. It is the whole perceptron. The perceptron theory is based on using human natural language as a window on brain computation. In this situation, the inputs to the perceptron and its output are predications or subject-predicate propositions you can speak and understand. The inputs are divided into inputs about a subject and a predicate that sums, literally, to the proposition. Each subject and its context predicate are many perceptron propositions. Any sentence in any natural language can reveal those explicitly asserted by what you say. For example, if you say my brain can understand my brain, the asserted perceptrons are all the words spoken as propositions, and propositional ideas, brain is mine, understanding is possible, brain is mine, again, my brain can be understood, and finally, my brain can understand my brain. And this is just a small fraction of all the perceptrons lighting up for that sentence by other necessary and sufficient inferences in your brain. A sentence is always a hierarchy of such perceptrons which any person can observably construct by the simple grammar or logical propositions that can be asserted out loud from the understanding of the sentence. The perceptron theory developed by this kind of natural language analysis of brain computation makes the prediction that any perceptron proposition computed in a neural system can be described in human natural language once it is found. If we know how all the other ways, in addition to what is explicitly said, to find those perceptrons. The fact is that when I first encountered the perceptron, I saw it as a pretty crummy, too oversimplified version of a correlation function. Indeed, Wikipedia comes in handy and tells you a perceptron computes the simplest type of correlation called a cross-correlation function is often symbolized in math as the capital R. Cross-correlation, Wikipedia. In signal processing, cross-correlation is a measure of similarity of two series as a function of the displacement of an.wikipedia.org. The correlation function taught in most statistics classes is little r, or the Pearson correlation coefficient. This method of computing correlation has some desirable mathematical properties as a measure of linear correlation. Note, both R and R are similar in that both are a weighted input multiplication. The weight memory in a perceptron R is very like a squared, multiplied together, difference between observed input and expected memory value in a Pearson coefficient R variance value. We know there are in fact countless different ways to compute correlations, so the perceptron is a model implementation choice of a multiplied input and input reference memory. It can be thought of as an arbitrary modeling decision in the perceptron theory of brain computation. From experience in modeling in the scales of complexity required for human modeling, we believe such implementation detail makes little difference. So we choose the simplest to practically implement, which is the perceptron cross-correlation R. We provably do this. R is actually utilized as the central unit computation on most if not all modern humanoid AI that you see today in ChatGPT, Gemini, Grok, Claude, and other modern AI systems that service human needs for information. Pearson correlation coefficient, Wikipedia. In statistics, the Pearson correlation coefficient, PCC, also known as Pearson's R, the Pearson product moment, n.wikipedia.org. It isn't hard to imagine an indefinite number of ways that inputs to a perceptron-like unit could be correlated to memory weights to yield outputs. We also know your whole neural system makes nonlinear classifications all the time, which you can easily prove if you observe your natural language sentences for anything you see, do, or think. To summarize why I chose the perceptron computation for the theory of brain computation, I actually believe it does not matter what measure of correlation the brain actually computes in perceptron-like units. What matters is their massive numbers of units of parallel computation and their complex organizations of inputs and output and memory weights that condition the meaning of the inputs. Proper perceptrons are about as simple as you can get, so I just go with perceptrons. But if you prove to me empirically that the perceptron-like unit classifiers are of 1,000 different correlation types in a human brain for the estimated 1,000 types of neuron which neuroscience finds in human brains, I would just say that's fine. It really didn't matter to the problem of modeling how your brain computes. The reason I go with perceptrons is that they are about the simplest way to do a correlation in terms of the electronics needed to simulate human brain computation. This notion of being simple with respect to the electronics needed to model brain computation is very important considering the unimaginably large number of such units and the parallel computation speeds required to emulate human brain speeds. Using the Turing test as evidence, the computational model is correct. All modern AI systems for large language model understanding and production, LLMs, computer vision, graphics rendering, and imagining in general are based on perceptrons as you expect by this analysis. These modeling systems notably behave hauntingly like human brains behave in servicing human needs for information. I have long accepted the Turing test, which involves content generation, content understanding, and speed as evidence that we have human brain computation modeled correctly. These modern AI systems are operating at a fraction of the computational capacity of the human brain for a number of reasons, and yet, once they are big enough, they perceive, think, and act like humans do. This is both good and bad. Good in the sense that they pass the Turing test, or reasonably close to it, and bad in that they pass the Turing test too. The human brain is a truth engine, but the truth it evolved to compute is intuited truth. It is not the logical proof that science and mathematics often depend. The reason the brain intuits truth, even though it could have evolved to use only logical truth, is that survival of a species depends on getting the truth of reality, including inner realities, fast, even if it means guessing. And, most all the time, no brain has enough for the premises proven for any logical deduction to be feasible. Often truth has to be intuition and can never be actually proven because the truth values of the premises can never be known. An example of this, which is a property of nearly every verb in every human natural language, is the intention another brain has in perceiving, thinking, and doing. Whether or not someone else intended to do something can rarely be known with certainty, yet our survival often depends on us knowing other people's intentions. This is quite nearly enough of an empirical justification for brains being evolved to rapidly intuit truth, even if that means that sometimes they get the truth wrong. Perceptrons in neural networks as a way to organize perceptrons for neural processing. When you see modern AI doing its amazing humanoid things, such as answering questions about anything, imagining anything visually, winning intelligence tests, having conversations, telling stories, writing poems, programming computers, doing mathematics, or anything else that humans can do, you are told these are neural networks. Actually, they are simplifications or models of what neural networks actually do that use perceptrons at their core, but organize those perceptrons and compute on them very efficiently. Geoffrey Hinton, who deservedly won a Nobel Prize on this, was among the thousands of people who have employed a certain simplification which you can understand is just perceptron processing within a certain defined framework. This framework does two things. It tells you how to connect the perceptrons up together so that the outputs and inputs are organized in easy ways to understand and, importantly, to compute. Neural networks are perceptrons organized in layers. Here is a picture of 3 layers, just so you can see where the perceptrons are. Each perceptron is a dot. The inputs to a dot at any layer are the fingers of the perceptron, and the outputs of each dot are all the perceptrons in that dot going upwards in the network from the raw input propositions to the raw output propositions possible. If you draw the arrows in the other direction, you also have perceptrons where the input weights can change. Learn new memories by changing the memory weights using so-called backprop or backwards propagation. Now, if you imagine a system where, more realistically, the number of perceptrons are in the many hundreds or thousands, you can see how advanced AI systems compute on perceptrons that are effective in modeling human behaviors. All these perceptrons are computed in parallel for each layer. This can place enormous loads on conventional computers, but at least we have a framework for organizing perceptrons together, so that many can be computed at once. This is where a certain advance in linear algebra came in to revolutionize the speed of our complex models of brain computation. The best document I have seen on this is from Grok, where I asked what is the linear algebra trick for computing weights between fully connected layers in neural networks. He correctly stated, the linear algebra trick for fully connected dense layers in neural networks is to represent everything with matrix multiplications and outer products. This replaces slow nested loops with highly optimized BLAS-GEM operations, what GPUs excel at, for both the forward pass, computing layer outputs from weights, and backward pass, computing weight gradients for updates. Here is his full response with the linear algebra simplification defined. If you want to know the linear algebra trick that revolutionized modern AI and turned it into a computer graphics problem, x.com. It is important to mention here that just like perceptrons are a stand-in for a class of computations that are useful but not necessarily fully accurate about how neurons compute, the complexity simplifications of using fully connected perceptron layers is also useful but almost certainly not fully accurate. It just doesn't make that much difference to our theory of brain computation because in our case the devil is not in the details. The devil is in getting our electronic machines to compute as fast as real neural networks can compute between your ears. This is still perceptron theory even if we use simplifications of linear algebra. Just as we do not believe that the simple perceptron computation is actually what neurons compute, We do not believe the brain is a linear algebra machine, either. We can do this because our explanation of how your brain computes is a model of how it computes, which is easy to understand and explain. Even if the engineering to verify we have a good theory on mathematical grounds can get quite unbrain-like. We assumed some things just didn't matter. Summary to explain your brain to your brain. When you wonder what your brain is doing, look at either of your hands as one propositional memory of many billions which recognizes a truth in reality on occasion. Now, imagine your hand with 3,000 fingers of two types. A subject which is the subject of a logical predication, and a predicate which is the predicate or context in which this subject has been found. Your hand is a perceptron that computes the intuited, contextual truth. It tells how the contextual fingers predicate the subject fingers to tell the thumb what to do. If you want empirical evidence of the perceptron theory model of brain computation, do not deny that you can talk to other people and observe they will understand and change their behavior in ways you can understand. This can include just talking back to you. It can include just being silent and not responding because, as was your brain was evolved to know, there is deceit out there. And sometimes the right action for survival is to lay low and don't move. It's how your brain computes. Don't deny what you plainly know you can plainly observe. Science starts with careful observation. Observe carefully and see for yourself.